Hare Krishna, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to our continuing series on the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham. We welcome all of you. We'll begin with the proper etiquette. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, today we will continue with our discussions on Krishna's pastimes in the city of Mathura. One might wonder why we're describing Krishna's pastimes over several lectures in Mathura, when for so many months we're focusing on Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, which you could say are considered on a much higher level. Well, they actually are on a much higher level. Of course, we shouldn't discriminate, because all of the Lord's pastimes are transcendental, and they're all by His desire. They're all arranged by Himself. And certainly His city of Mathura is very dear to Him. Rupa Goswami glorifies Mathura in verse 83 of his Padyavali. He writes, Shamam eva param rupam puri maru puri vara vaya kashar kamdheyam adya eva paro rasha. Quote, the form of Shamasundar is the supreme form. The city of Mathura is the supreme abode. Lord Krishna's fresh youth should always be meditated upon, and the mellow of conjugal love is the supreme mellow. Now, Srila Prabhupada also writes very affectionately about Mathura in the Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 10th chapter, verse 27, purport. Prabhupada writes, quote, the heavenly planets are more celebrated than the earth, but the celebrity of earth has defeated that of the heavenly planets because of Dwarka, where Lord Shri Krishna reigned as a king. 3 places, namely Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka, are more important than the famous planets within this universe. These places are perpetually sanctified because wherever the Lord descends on earth, He displays His transcendental pastimes, particularly in these 3 places. They are perpetually the holy lands of the Lord, and the inhabitants take advantage of these holy places, even though the Lord is now out of their sight. Unquote. Let me also quote our beloved Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, who writes in Viveka Shatakam, text number 68. He's actually addressing the Lord in this prayer. Mathura gives a taste for your devotional service and makes one's mind feel no attraction for the path of material existence. Mathura spreads your blissfulness, removes darkness, and throws all calamities far away. Mathura gives the pleasure of saintly association and churns the ocean of honoring you. O Gopinath, please bring me to Mathura, for I have a strong desire to see your lotus feet. Wow. Nevertheless, there are significant differences in the moods between Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka. Now, these moods are described as perfect, or the moods there are described as perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. Where do we get that terminology? From Srila Rupa Goswami in his illustrious, glorious Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In 2.1-220, he writes, even though Krishna is the topmost jewel amongst unlimited heroes, endowed with eternal qualities, he is described as having 3 forms which manifest according to the type of devotion in his devotees. And in 221, he goes on, the Lord takes 3 forms, perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. These are described in Natya Shastra as inferior, medium, and best. Now this concept of perfect, more perfect, and most perfect, now in the next verse he relates it to the Dhams, or Dhams means the residence of Krishna when he was on this earth where he lived. In 123 he says, in Gokula, Krishna appears as most perfect. In Dwarka, Mathura, and other places, he appears as perfect and more perfect. So in conclusion, in Gokula, Vrindavan, Krishna's pastimes are most perfect. So we're aspiring Brajabasis. Like one time Prabhupada said, Vaishnava, he said, Vaishnava is a very exalted thing. I am trying to become Vaishnava. So we are kind of at the bottom of the totem pole. We're trying to become Brajavasis. So why not just stick to Brajalila? Well, because Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan are actually very confidential. And they must be approached, you could say, rather cautiously. Prabhupada's explained this on numerous occasions, that these Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan are narrated by Shukadev Goswami in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And because of their confidential nature, one is recommended to first read the first 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam before reading the 10th canto. By reading the first 9 cantos, we get an appreciation of the transcendental opulence, the power, the grandeur of God or Krishna. We understand his supreme position above the modes of material nature, Purushotam, the greatest amongst all male personalities. And in this way, when we hear his confidential pastimes in the 10th canto, we won't think ill. We won't think they're improper or immoral. They're transcendental. So, just as we go through the first 9 cantos and hear about his opulences, his grandeur, etc. So hearing about Krishna's pastimes in Mathura also helps in this way, because those pastimes are indeed opulent and full of grandeur, grand. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to the Bhagavatam 10.3.31, and I quote, in Mathura and Dwarka, the love for the Lord is mixed with appreciation of his opulence. That's a wonderful thing. Mixed with appreciation of his opulence. But in Braj, the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's not exhibited. So what we're getting at here is that by studying Krishna in Mathura, it will help us understand him in Vrindavan, fully appreciate his confidential pastimes. Rupa Goswami writes in Padyavali, verse 315, quote, Lord Shiva hinted to his wife Parvati that Lord Madhava eternally enjoys pastimes with the lotus-faced gopis in Vrindavan. Because these jewel-like pastimes are a very great secret, Vyasadev's son, Shukadev Goswami, who knows the actual truth, described Lord Krishna's entrance into Mathura. Same principle here. Because they're very confidential, Shukadev Goswami's describing Krishna in Mathura first. Like that. And with that, dear devotees, we find ourselves today again in Mathura. Previously we discussed that Krishna, after arriving in Mathura, on the invitation of King Kamsa for a wrestling match, you remember, he toured the city. He met with a washerman, a weaver, a florist, and Kubja, the hunchback. We had a whole lecture just about Kubja. Then he proceeded to where the wrestling match was to take place, the sacrificial arena. And there he broke the bow of Shiva. Shiva had actually given this bow to King Kamsa. Lord Shiva had gifted it to Kamsa. That very powerful and prestigious bow, on the condition that no one would harm that bow. If it was harmed or broken, Shiva said, that would be an indication that Kamsa would soon meet his death. Actually, this is described in Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 42nd chapter, verse 15. Tata puran pracho mano danusa shtanam achyuta tajmin pavishto dadrishe danar aindram ivadbhutam. And I quote, Kamsa had organized a Dhanush Yagya for worshipping the sacred bow that Lord Shiva had gifted to him. Lord Shiva had asked Kamsa to worship this bow very nicely and also warned him that if this bow would break, then his death was assured. So after breaking the great bow of Shiva and fighting off all the soldiers that Kamsa had sent, Krishna and Balaram walked back to the encampment that the Brajavasis had set up that morning upon their arrival. Actually, we've only discussed one day here in Mathura. So after all this had taken place, Krishna's wandering through the marketplaces in Mathura, and then going to check out the sacrificial arena where the wrestling match is going to take place, and then breaking the bow and killing all this. Krishna and Balaram arrived back where the Brajavasis were camped at 6 p.m. Well, I read 6 p.m. It's described they could have stayed out longer touring the city because it's described, after all, Mathura was Krishna's city. It wasn't Kamsa's. We think, Kamsa's the ruler of Mathura. No. Rupa Goswami confirms this, that Mathura belongs to Krishna. Again, in Padyavali 124, and I quote, O Mathura, your master, Muramardana. Muramardana is a name for Krishna. O Mathura, the city, your master, Muramardana, hesitates to bestow prem bhakti to devotees. But you easily grant this pure love to the practicing devotees, even if they stay just one night within your boundaries. Therefore, there are no words to express your glories. So Rupa Goswami refers to Krishna as master of Mathura, and he uses the name Muramardana. Muramardana means the killer of the Mura demon. It's just that Kamsa had unlawfully taken over Mathura from King Ugrasena. That we'll mention a little bit later. So anyway, Krishna could have toured his city longer, but he came back relatively early to the encampment because the next day was Shivaratri, a very special day where we worship Lord Shiva. If we do the math, we'll understand that Kamsa was killed on Shivaratri. And my illustrious godbrother, from whom I take so much knowledge, actually, because Prabhupada said knowledge means to know where to get it. So Shastras, and I have very elevated godbrothers, Gopi Puranadana, Radha Govinda Maharaj, and Shivaram Swami. And then there's the scriptures. But Radha Govinda Maharaj, I read, he stated that as a result, because Kamsa was killed on Shivaratri, he entered the eternal abode. So the brothers got back a little bit early to the camp because it was going to be Shivaratri, and they were hungry. And Mother Yasoda, it's so cute, Mother Yasoda had sent a clay pot full of boiled milk mixed with rice from Vrindavan. It's described that Krishna and Balaram didn't eat any cooked food in Mathura on that visit. Everything was sent from Braj. So while there, they just ate Mother Yasoda's cooking. So after they ate the salty preparations, they ate kheer, they ate sweet rice, and they said thus they slept very soundly. Now it's described that Krishna knew that Kamsa would be trying to kill him the next day, because, well, for one reason, Krishna broke Shiva's bow. Nevertheless, Krishna slept very peacefully. Someone's going to, how someone's going to kill you, then you don't sleep very well. But Krishna's unconquerable. So he slept very peacefully, and Balaram. But Nanda Baba, Krishna's father, and the other men, no, they stayed awake throughout the entire night. They worried about Krishna, because it says Nanda Maharaj heard that Krishna had broken the sacrificial bow. However, he thought the Lord Narayan had entered Krishna's body and broke the bow. That's how he thought it. Because they just see Krishna as their adorable son. His godhood is hidden from them by the Yogamaya. So Nanda Maharaj, wow, my Krishna broke the bow? So it must have been that Lord Narayan entered his body and broke the bow. Nevertheless, he knew Krishna would be held responsible and not Lord Narayan. So he wanted to protect Krishna. He sincerely felt like that. This is Vatsalya Rasa, very popular rasa, to protect God. I read it said so beautifully, one who is protecting the entire universe is being protected by Nanda Maharaj. One who is protecting the entire universe, Sri Krishna, is being protected by his devotee. The sweetness of Vatsalya Rasa. Now, at the same time, elsewhere in Mathura, there was Kamsa. He was having great difficulty sleeping. How do we know? Because the Bhagavatam tells us so. 10:42:26. Kamshas tu danusho bhangam rakshinam sva balasya cha bandam nishamya Govinda Rama Vikri Ditam Param. Quote, wicked Kamsa, on the other hand, was terrified, having heard how Krishna and Balaram had broken the bow and killed all his, well, not all, but many of his guards and soldiers, as simply a game. He remained awake for a long time, and both while awake and dreaming, he saw many bad omens, many messengers of death, many notices. It's like you'll post a notice around town. And Kamsa was especially afraid because he had been made aware of his previous birth by the grace of Narada Muni. Narada Muni met him and revealed to him who he was in his past life. And that made him afraid in his present life. Why? Because in that previous birth, he'd been a demon of the name Kalanimi, who had been killed by Vishnu. He'd already been killed. History repeats itself. So he took his next birth in the Bhoja dynasty during Krishna's pastimes and became a stalwart enemy of the Jadu dynasty, Krishna's dynasty. And later, we know the pastime. He was driving the chariot of his sister Devaki and her husband Vasudeva on their marriage day, and he heard a voice from the sky, Akashvani, or Akashwani. It's a celestial voice from the sky, predicting that the 8th child of his sister Devaki would kill him. So that personality, Krishna, had already killed him. So he was terrified. So he went about imprisoning his father, Ugrasena, who was the king of both the Yadu and the Bhoja dynasties, declared himself king, had many soldiers, so forth and so on. But you can't stop these predictions. Just like when Brahmanas are described as the Lord's representatives on this earth, like quote-unquote gods on earth with a small g. Brahmanas are so, by nature, they should be so pure that whatever they say, it will come to pass. If they utter a curse, their curse can't be retracted. It can be adjusted, but it can't be like that. So he was so powerful, Kamsa, but living in fear because of this omen, or you could say this Akashvani, this voice from the sky, and the omens that he was starting to see, both in his dreaming and in his waking state, in his daydreams. The verse we quoted, Srimad Bhagavatam 4, 10:42-26, says that while dreaming, Kamsa saw bad omens, indications that he was going to die. Now, there's a shastra called Swapna Vichar Mimamsa. Swapna means dreams. Swapna Vichar Mimamsa. It's actually a body of literature, and it deals with the interpretation of dreams. I think some modern psychologist, 100 years ago, who was that? He tried to understand or interpret dreams. Yeah, but that's all mental speculation. Everything's there in the Vedas. So this Swapna Vichar Mimamsa, it gives detailed information on the meaning of dreams. And this scripture, or this body of knowledge, it's briefly mentioned in Vedanta Sutra, and I found it quoted elaborately in Agni Purana. And I copied that and bound that into a book, which I have found it to be very accurate in explaining the meanings of some of the dreams that I've had. Yeah. It's not transcendental knowledge, but it's more like Niti Shastra. Niti means logic and reasoning, like Chanakya Pandit has his Niti Shastra, which teaches you how to live life in this world, how to deal, the best way to live in this world while pursuing transcendental knowledge. There's a certain dynamic to this material nature. If you can figure it out, you can have simple life with high thinking. That's Niti Shastra. So this Swapna Vichar Mimamsa, it can be used like, I use it like a road map. Like you have a map and you see what's ahead. And if you see there's a curve, you slow down. If it's a straight path, then you go for it. Like astrology, it's the same principle. So Swapna Vichar Mimamsa works because it is Shastra. It's there in the Vedanta Sutra and there in the Agni Purana. And as we know, Shastra is infallible. So it was really interesting finding that knowledge. Now, I'll share with you a little bit of it because I'm sure you're curious, and it relates somewhat to what we're discussing here. In chapter 229 of Swapna Vichar Mimamsa, a sage is speaking. And he goes on for many, 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 many pages, but I'll just quote to you a couple of pages where he describes good and bad omens that appear in one's dreams and what they mean. He also describes how to prevent bad dreams. So the following are some of the inauspicious omens that you don't want to see in a dream. But if you see them, we say in Polish, uwaga, watch out. These are the things you don't want to see in a dream. The growth of grass and trees on one's body, except the navel. The breaking of bronze, metal on one's head. Seeing yourself clad in torn dress. Seeing yourself anointed with oil or covered with mud. Seeing yourself falling from a great height, playing on a lute or any other similar stringed instrument, swinging in a hammock, seeing yourself killing a serpent, seeing red flowers, riding a pig, a dog, an ass, or a camel, eating the flesh of birds, of course we won't see that, entering your mother's womb, and seeing yourself starting on a journey in the southern direction. Seeing yourself sweeping the house. All these and many more are inauspicious signs and dreams. And many more, I say, it goes on and on. It's a big, thick book. But let's go on to good dreams. Dreaming of the following is auspicious. Seeing yourself climbing a hill, a mansion, an elephant, a horse, or a bull. Seeing trees in one's dream. Seeing white flowers in the sky is very auspicious. Similarly, seeing oneself having many arms and many heads. Seeing yourself with gray hair in a dream, it's auspicious. Or wearing a garland of white flowers, or wearing a white garment, all this is auspicious. So too is seeing an eclipse of the moon or the sun surrounded by stars in a dream. If you watch an eclipse, it's not good, but if in a dream, it's supposed to be good. Then, seeing oneself embracing a flag post or raising a banner, very good and very auspicious. We like to hear the good, right? So too, that body of knowledge says, so too are seeing land and a stream of water, victory over the enemies, success in dispute. If you see yourself playing dice, or you see yourself in battle, if you see yourself eating sweet porridge, this is very auspicious, very good. If you see yourself drinking milk, as well as making marks with weapons on the earth. Goes on, so too seeing a clear sky, a calf drinking milk from its mother's udder, and then seeing female buffaloes, lionesses, elephants, and mares, female horses, is commendable. And then it concludes, let it be known that seeing the favor of the gods, or seeing Brahmins, or seeing one's spiritual master in a dream, that is most commendable and most auspicious and has a wonderful result in the day. So I don't want this to be a class on the science of dreams, but one more thing, it says, the Swapna Vicharamimamsa goes on to say that, quote, dreams dreamt in the first quarter of the night yield results within a year. Dreams dreamt in the second quarter of the night yield results within 6 months. And dreams dreamt in the third quarter of the night yield results in 1 week. But dreams that you dream in the last quarter of the night, they yield results, auspicious or inauspicious, the same day. So it's interesting. So back to Mathura and Kamsa. So of course, being the asura that Kamsa was, his dreaming were full of bad omens, like notices that he was going to die. Well, but if you think about it, pious people also receive the same notices eventually. Life is tough and then you die. One day everyone's going to have to die, not just Kamsa, everyone. And we all get the notice, don't we? We get notices, kind of like, okay, get ready, prepare yourself. Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tiyachata yanta kalevaram. What you're thinking about when you leave this body, that state you will attain. So we know that's there, but these are reminders. These pastimes are reminding us. Actually, I found a very nice story well, it's actually the traditional wisdom of India, put it like that. And I'll share it with you. Once there was a very sinful person who was destined to die as a young man. It was just his karma. So when that time came, Yamaraj appeared before him and said, all right, it's your time, young man. You're young, but you've been very sinful. I'm taking you to hell. So the boy became very angry. And he said to Yamaraj, like, you talk back to Yamaraj? Anyway, he said, Yamaraj, how dare you come here without any prior notice? What is this? You have no culture? So Yamaraj, he just smiled. He said, okay. And he left. But many, many years later, when that boy had grown up, he was very old. Yamaraj came back. And he said, okay, sir, enough now. Now's your time. You come with me. So now the old man said, well, wait a minute. You did the same thing last time. You came without any notice. Go away. So Yamaraj, he's very cool. He said calmly, no, sir. This time I sent you so many notices. So the old man said, well, Yamaraj said, but you didn't recognize any of them. So the old man said, well, what notices were those, pray tell? I didn't see any notices. So Yamaraj said, well, they were notices I was coming very soon. Number one, when your legs were paining and you weren't able to stand. That was my first notice. Number two, when your hair started turning gray, that was my second notice. I'm coming. Number three, when your ears became deaf, that was my third notice. Number four, when your vision started becoming blurry, that was my fourth notice. And when your memory started to fail you, senior moment, that was my fifth notice. In other words, these were all notices of old age which comes just before you die. Which means that your darshan with me is just around the corner, and you have rounded that corner, sir. So now you come with me, and off they went. So notices are there, not just for Kamsa, but for everyone as well. So the Bhagavatam goes into like detail exactly what Kamsa was seeing, what were his notices. What notices was he getting in wakefulness and sleep? Well, Bhagavatam says, first of all, he saw his reflection. When he saw his reflection in the mirror or on a surface of water, he couldn't see his head, though he had one in reality. And when he looked at his shadow on the ground, there was a hole in the center, as if there was a hole in his body. He saw himself, riding donkeys and so many things. Actually, Bhagavatam, let's quote the Bhagavatam, 10:42-31. Ayani chetam bhutani swapna, means like dream. Jaga ritani cha pasyam marana shantashto nidram, dream. Nebi cha chintaya. Kamsa was seeing all these things and more in dreaming and while awake. So he didn't sleep well. And he knew that Krishna's coming now. Of course, his plan was to kill Krishna, but it's kind of like, who's going to win, Trump or Biden? It's a very close race. Today, we haven't got to the election yet. Maybe you'll hear this lecture and you'll know who won, but it seemed like a close race between Kamsa and Krishna. This was Kamsa was thinking. So he had his plans, just like Hiranyakashipu. So the next morning, the day of the wrestling match, Kamsa, I thought, okay, look it. I'll arrange for this giant elephant that I have named Kuvalyapida to be at the entrance to the stadium when Krishna and Balaram enter. And I'll arrange for his elephant keeper to be there as well. His mahut. In Telugu they say Mavati. So Kamsa said to the elephant owner that you take your elephant, Kuvalyapida, this grand elephant, and you block the entrance to the wrestling arena. And you have this elephant just trample Krishna and Balaram under his huge feet. And that'll be the end of it. I won't have to worry. If that doesn't work, then there's Chanura and Mushtika. I've got all the bases covered. And it was a formidable plan. I mean, not with Krishna, but with anybody else, because Kuvalyapida was no ordinary elephant. Like his keeper, he was of demoniac nature. It's described when Kuvalyapida would walk on the surface of the earth, Mother Earth would feel pida. She would feel pain, P-I-D-A. She would feel so much pain. Because this Kuvalyapida, he had the strength of 10,000 huge elephants. Just like Aravata, the elephant of Lord Indra. So when Krishna woke up that fateful morning, what did he do? Well, first thing he did is he sent Nanda Maharaj and the other Brajabasis to the wrestling arena before him and Balaram. He told them that if you don't go early, you're not going to get a seat because everyone's going to come and watch. But Krishna had a hidden meaning. The real reason that Krishna sent them early was because, he's present everywhere, he's all-knowing. He was aware that Kamsa was arranging this ferocious elephant to kill him and Balaram. And Krishna understood that if Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd boys saw this gigantic, ferocious, and powerful elephant, Kuvalyapida, they would try to stop Krishna and Balaram from fighting this elephant. It would be a big mess. They don't see Krishna as God. They see him as the most adorable young boy. They're covered, so to speak, by the Yogamaya. So, yeah, Krishna thought, well, if they see this, they're going to get really worried if this elephant attacks me. And they're going to wonder how I killed the elephant. So, yeah, the Brajabasis went off. They got front row seats. And then Krishna and Balaram, they're just very cool because Krishna's Ajita, he's unconquerable. They went to bathe in the Jamuna River, and they're kind of taking their time, and then suddenly Krishna heard the sound of so many musical instruments heralding the upcoming wrestling match. So he turned to Balaram, he said, Balaram, that's enough bathing. Let's get dressed and go to the wrestling match. And they had their clothes, because remember when they were going through Mathura, the weaver brought them very nice clothes made for wrestlers. So they dressed up like wrestlers. Now, the Bhagavatam describes that when Krishna and Balaram reached the main entrance, the gate to the wrestling arena, well, let's hear the Bhagavatam. 10:43-2. Rangadwaram shamas adya, tajmin nagam avashtitam, apasyat Kuvalyapidam, Krishnam bhashta prachoditam. When Krishna reached the entrance to the arena, he saw the elephant, Kuvalyapida, blocking his way at the urging of his keeper. And then, Badva parikaram shuri, somya kutila la kalan, uvacha hasti, pamvacha meganadagapi raya. As soon as Krishna saw this scene, he bound his waistcloth tightly to get ready for the fight. He also tied his curly locks of hair so that they may not block his vision in the fight. Curly hair. Then it's described that Krishna spoke to the elephant keeper. His voice sounded like the rumbling of clouds. Make way for me and Balaram to pass through the gate. But the elephant keeper, he wouldn't move. He was only there for the fight. So Krishna warned him that unless you move, we're going to send you an elephant to the abode of Yamaraj. So that only incited the elephant keeper and the elephant. Both became very angry. So the elephant keeper unchained Kuvalyapida, and what he did is it's described, he tapped on Kuvalyapida's forehead, indicating what he should do. There was some kind of little sign like that. So the Shastra says, the Lord of Elephants charged Krishna and violently seized him with his trunk. But Karadvig litaso mum ihat yankajas valiyata. Then Lord Krishna reduced the size of his body and quickly escaped the elephant's grip. Just whoosh. Mystics, they have the yogis, they have the siddhis. They can become larger than the largest and smaller than the smallest. So Krishna, he's the master of all mystic powers. So he escaped from the elephant's grip, and while doing so, the Lord hit the elephant on its trunk. Because for many animals, the most sensitive part of their body, the most sensitive sense, in some animals it's the nose. They get around by the nose like that. I remember when I was a teenager, one time we went surfing with some of my friends. We went to Mazatlan in Mexico, and we were surfing the waves, and then there came the warning from the beach. One of the lifeguards, he put up a sign, there's sharks in the area. So everybody ran in, but we were like young and foolish. So we're going to stay out here. We don't care about any sharks. So I got a little bit worried, and one of my friends said, no, don't worry. If a shark comes, you just hit him on the nose. That's the most sensitive part of their body. If you hit him on the nose, they'll go away. Oh, okay. So we were very confident that if the shark comes, we'll just hit him on the nose. I don't think that would have happened. But we didn't have to worry because the sharks didn't come. Anyway, the nose is very sensitive. So what's the nose of the elephant? Its trunk. So boom, Krishna hit him like that. It's described he hit the elephant with his soft yet thunderbolt-like hands. Interesting. His soft yet thunderbolt-like hands. And then what did Krishna do? he disappeared between the elephant's 4 legs. However, the elephant immediately detected where Krishna was because, elephants identify objects not with their vision, but again with their sense of smell. I was reading the eyes of an elephant are very small. So traditional wisdom, they say here in India that the elephant has small eyes so that it can't see its huge body and become proud. Some traditional wisdom. The elephant has small eyes so it can't see its huge body and become proud. Nature's way. So anyway, the Lord's running around between these 4 legs of the elephant. It's described playing hide and seek behind the creature's legs, just like he does with his cowherd boyfriends behind the trees of Braja. They play hide and seek. He was playing hide and seek between the creature's legs like he does with his boyfriends in Braj. So then Krishna took the fight a little bit away from the gate. He started running through the streets of Mathura with the elephant close behind him. And sometimes Krishna would turn around and he'd kick or punch or slap Kuvalyapida, call him bad names and laugh at him. So when they got back to the entrance to the wrestling arena, Krishna actually grabbed Kuvalyapida by his tail. You see elephants, they have a tail, not a big tail, but they have a tail. And he began playfully dragging him around. Actually, it's described, he dragged Kuvalyapida a full 25 bow lengths. He dragged him a full 25 bow lengths. Now, believe it or not, in some research I did, I found out what is 25 bow lengths. It's equal to almost 50 yards or 45.72 meters. So if someone says, it's 25 bow lengths, I say, yeah, I know, that's 50 yards. So then it's described that Krishna was dragging him everywhere by his tail, just as Garuda easily drags a snake around. But based on this one detail, it's a little detail, how Krishna grabbed his tail and was pulling him all over Mathura by his tail, it's said that people in Mathura, even today, there's a saying, if you want to find Krishna, find someone pulling on the tail of an animal. Just a cute saying. If you want to find Krishna here in Mathura, find someone pulling on the tail of an animal, because that's what Krishna famously did 5,000 years ago with Kuvalyapida. So then Krishna kept holding on to the elephant's tail, and he was twisting him around and around, left, right, and center. And this caused Krishna to swerve in so many different opposite directions, but very, very beautifully. Like a young boy, holding on the tail of a calf trying to get away. It's a very beautiful description in the scriptures. We don't have time for all that now, but just Krishna's being thrown left and right and back is so beautiful. So Balaram, where was Balaram? Balaram was just watching all this roaring with laughter. So then Krishna let go of the elephant's tail, and the Bhagavatam describes the next part of the battle, 10:43:11. Sadavan kridaya bhumho patitva sahasotita tam matva patitam krudo dantabayam sohanashitam. Danta, we know that means like teeth or tusks. So what happened? Quote, as Krishna dodged about, he playfully fell on the ground and quickly got up again. However, the raging elephant, thinking Krishna was down, tried to gore him with his tusks, but struck the earth instead. Then Kuvalyapida, he got up and he charged towards Krishna. And Krishna, it's described, seized his trunk, which is, quote, the main weapon of an elephant. What's the elephant's main weapon? His trunk. We're learning so many interesting things here. Exactly what is 25 bow lengths? What's the main weapon of an elephant? How to find Krishna in Mathura. Oh, the Shastras are so wonderful. The Acharyas are so wonderful. So Krishna swirled the elephant around by its trunk, like he did with the ass demon, Denakasura. And then he broke off one of his trunks. And then Balaram he broke off one of its tusks. And then Balaram broke off the other tusk. An elephant has two white tusks. And together they finished off the cruel and demoniac elephant with his own tusks. Killed the elephant. Now, a small note, no one should think that we as members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness condone the killing or the abuse of stately elephants. We're talking about an elephant being killed here. As is going on in the world today, especially in Africa, Krishna's pastimes are on a different level. He was often attacked by demoniac men and women who would assume such forms as an elephant, a horse, a bull, a stork, a snake, a beautiful lady like Putana. They would assume these forms. These were unscrupulous men and women, demons disguising themselves as innocent creatures so they could get away initially with what they were doing. Because civilized people don't want to hurt any creature. An animal, a bird, a fish, an insect. They're all part of God's creatures. Just like a family man. He loves all his children, irregardless of who they are or what. Vidya vinaya sampane brahmani gavi hastani sunichava sapakicha pandita samadarshanaha. Devotee sees everyone equally. But these demons, they assume these forms. But Krishna knew their evil hearts and gave them the just punishment. However, Lord Krishna is the most compassionate and merciful of all. Because when the cruel Kuvalyapida was killed, by Krishna's arrangement, his soul left that elephant's dead body and gloriously entered into the body of the Lord. What? He merged into the body of the Lord. How could that be? Well, it's described in Shastra. In his previous life, Kuvalyapida had been the son of Bali Maharaja. And his name was Mandagati, who, as a young man, while on pilgrimage to Ranga Kshetra, he just kind of like, in the pilgrimage, he just pushed his way through a big crowd of pilgrims to see the deity, like he was a wild elephant. Just, hey, out of my way. This is actually described in Garga Samhita, fifth chapter of the Garga Samhita. So then there was a great sage present. I'd never heard of the sage before. His name was Trita Muni, Trita, Trita Muni, who saw Mandagati's gross behavior, and he cursed him. Hey, since you act like an elephant, you should become one. So to the great distress of Mandagati, the sage's words like immediately started to come true. So Mandagati, again, he's had good association in his lifetime. He just went off the rails. So he knew the science. So he prayed for mercy. He had remorse. So Trita Muni assured him that, okay, you take this form of the elephant because I cursed you and I can't retract it, but I say that one day the Supreme Lord himself will liberate you from my curse. So Mandagati then took birth as an elephant of supernatural strength, and his name was Kuvalyapida. Now we know his history. And Kuvalyapida lived in the jungle in the Vidya hills until the infamous Jarasandha. Jarasandha is one of the main kings that Krishna came to kill, this burden of the earth. Jarasandha. On one expedition, Jarasandha captured Kuvalyapida because he was such a powerful elephant. He was so powerful that Jarasandha required the help of 100,000 other elephants to capture him. Now we're getting an idea what Kuvalyapida is like. And then later, when Kamsa married Jarasanda's two daughters, King Kamsa married the two daughters of Jarasandha as part of the dowry, because the father of the girl has to give in dowry to the groom and family. Jarasandha gave Kuvalyapida as part of the dowry to Kamsa. So by that time, by bad association, because Jarasandha was bad, by that time Kuvalyapida had become completely demoniac. So, still, as we heard, Krishna killed him, and he upheld the words of Trita Muni, who said that one day the Supreme Lord himself would liberate you from the curse. So therefore Kuvalyapida's soul entered into Krishna's body. That's a good liberation, not just moksha, liberation from sin and karma, but liberation in the sense that his soul entered into Krishna's body. Not that he became Krishna, but his soul entered into Krishna's transcendental form. And one acharya says that it was also by the grace of Mandagati's great-grandfather, who was Bali Maharaja, that he not only merged into the Lord's body, but he attained a body by which to serve the Lord. Remember that in his previous birth, Kuvalyapida had been the son of Bali Maharaj as Mandagati. So his grandfather was Bali Maharaj. Transcendental genealogy. So, what else happened? Oh yeah. So now that there was nothing standing in their way, the elephant was gone, and the elephant keeper, he was also killed. Krsna and Balarma, it's described triumphantly, entered into the wrestling arena. Wait. Actually, it's described intoxicated by Krishna's triumph over Kuvalyapida. Some of the cowherd boys ran in first. The etiquette is the Lord should come first, and we all follow behind him. But this is, this is the Sakyaras, the cowherd boys. Hey, Krishna's their friend, he's very proud of him. He's the best friend anyone could ever have. So they ran in first. All the cowherd boys, yay, Krishna and Balaram just killed an elephant, a demon. Jai, jai, jai. So then Krishna and Balaram entered the arena. And both of them were still holding on to the tusks which they had torn off the elephant in order to kill the elephant. And they were all bloody and sweaty like this. Krishna and Balaram entered like that. So the acharyas say that this is an example of bibhatsa rasa. Bibhatsa rasa refers to the sentiment one feels or experiences upon seeing something ugly or distasteful. It could be there in material life, you see something and but sometimes we see things in spiritual life like this, Krishna carrying the tusk of an elephant bleeding, or Ramchandra fighting Ravana and so many dead soldiers, or like this. In the material life, but in spiritual life, when Krishna kills a demon, it brings relief to a devotee. When Bali Maharaja was watching Nrsingadev kill the tyrant Hiranyakashipu, he said, "Oh, how wonderful, how beautiful." Like that. So, bibhatsarasa, the sentiment one experiences when seeing something ugly or distasteful, like the bone of an animal, whatever. Bharatanatyam dancers, they often demonstrate this sentiment as facial expressions when they're depicting, Shiva killing some demons, or Ram and his pastimes, or Krishna with Putan or whatever. They'll make a face in this mood of bibhatsarasa, like that, killing Putan, Aghasura, or whatever. So the same there, as Krishna entered into the arena, many people felt, oh, how wonderful. These things you could say they're like, the tusk, or whatever it may be, which, and good things too, remind us of Krishna, like Krishna's decorations and Krishna's paraphernalia. A peacock feather reminds us. In Sanskrit, these are called udipanas. Udipana means they're stimulants for remembering Krishna. So they can be either like the tusk, or they can be a peacock feather, or you can see a white cloud, remember Balaram, or a dark cloud, remember Krishna. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu goes into great detail. These are udipanas, or stimulants for remembering Krishna. Like it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 12:59. There's an ordinary prince walking somewhere, but devotees, they didn't just see him as the prince. It's described, Pitambara dhare ange ratna abha rana, Shri Krishna shmarane tena haila udipana. Quote, the prince was dressed in yellow cloth, and there were jeweled ornaments decorating his body. Therefore, anyone who saw him would remember Krishna. Why? Because Krishna dresses in yellow cloth, and Krishna has jeweled ornaments on his body. So for a non-devotee it's nothing, but for one who wants to see Krishna everywhere, and a pure devotee does see Krishna everywhere, there are certain things that enhance his bhakti, enhance his devotion. So when these people who are devotees, they saw the yellow cloth, oh, Krishna. Or the jeweled ornaments, oh, Krishna. These things remind us. So therefore the broken tusk of the elephant of Kuvalyapida. It acted as a stimulant for remembering Krishna. And again, if we study Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we'll see that when we get to an advanced stage, there are certain things that will help us remember for Krishna, certain stimulants. But we don't have to wait very long, because we have something wonderful. Kali Kali Nam Rup Krishna Avatar, something that is descended from the spiritual sky. Golok Prem Dan Harinam Shankirtan Yagya Ki. Something that reminds us of Krishna, something very powerful that reminds us of Krishna, that comes from the spiritual sky. What is that? We can see Krishna everywhere also if we're always chanting his sweet holy names. Nama Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. Because Krishna is present fully in the sound of his name. And Prabhupada said so poetically one time, when you're chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna is dancing on the tip of your tongue. So that can act as a stimulus, you could say. It's Krishna himself in the form of his name. But in that way we can always be present with the Lord and always be enlivened. So I'd like to finish today's lecture on Mathura. We haven't finished Mathura because, well, the great battle hasn't happened. Da, 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 da. So Krishna's killing Kamsa. Yes, well, today is Tuesday, so on Friday we'll go into detail about that battle. It's very wonderful. And then that will complete our lectures on Mathura, and then having a deeper appreciation for the grandeur and opulence and who Krishna is as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, transcendental to this Mathura. We'll go back to our beloved Braj, and we'll read about his confidential pastimes with Srila Prabhupada's purports and the purports of our acharyas to understand them properly. But we're not out of Mathura yet, and we read in the very beginning of this class how dear Mathura is to Krishna himself. So we'll move on, but I'd like to finish with the verse about the holy name, because that is our connection to Krishna. That's the way we remain always inspired in devotional service. There's so many ways to be stimulated, but as soon as we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we're satisfied. So a beautiful verse, one of my favorite verses, Srila Rupa Goswami's Padyavali, verse number 19. Quote, may Krishna's holy name, which is a reservoir of all transcendental happiness, the destruction of Kali Yuga's sins, the most purifying of all purifying things, the saintly person's food as he traverses the path to the spiritual world, the pleasure garden where the voices of the greatest saints, philosophers, and poets play, the life of the righteous and the seed of the tree of religion bring transcendental happiness to all of you Prabhus, all of us. Hare Krishna. So thank you. We'll see you on Friday. I hope this helped you all appreciate the transcendental glories of Krishna in Mathura Dham. So, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Brindavan Eshwari, Shrimati Radharani ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Mathura Dham ki, back home, back to Godhead ki, Shri Goloka Brindavan Dham ki. Take all the fallen conditioned souls with us. Go Premanandi. Jai Jai Sisi Radhe.